The Supreme Court has issued a stay on a lower court's ruling involving the anti-abortion laws that were recently passed in Texas. Now, Texas had passed a number of anti-abortion laws, but the main concern here is whether or not clinics have admitting privileges. That means that there needs to be a surgical doctor on the premises who has the ability to admit someone from the clinic into a hospital should anything go wrong. Now, that all sounds like it's important, but the reality is this is not something that is needed when it comes to performing abortions. It's just a way to make abortions more restrictive in the state of Texas. Also consider the fact that in Texas, it's such a conservative state that many hospitals do not allow admitting privileges to abortion clinics. Now, with that said, after Texas passed these laws, of course, it was challenged in federal courts. However, this case went all the way to the Supreme Court, and now they have decided to issue a stay, so the laws are not in effect until the lawyers who are on the pro-choice side have an opportunity to appeal the lower court's ruling. So just to give you some more information on this, according to the Huffington Post, the High Court will allow the clinics to remain open while it decides whether to hear an appeal over a Texas law that requires all abortions to take place in ambulatory surgical centers, essentially mini hospitals. Okay? So this is great news coming from the Supreme Court. Of course, there's been a number of good things coming from the Supreme Court recently, especially when it comes to the Affordable Care Act, marriage equality, and now abortion laws in Texas. But I'm hopeful that the Supreme Court, even though they have a number of conservative justices, will make the right decision when it comes to this, because it was already established in 1973 with Roe v. Wade that there cannot be an undue burden on women when it comes to obtaining an abortion.
They just meant rich women. So, you know, again, if you're for overwhelming majority of women in Texas, unless you have a high income and live in an urban center, you can't get an abortion in the state. And so we've already seen the back alley abortions happen. And granted, yes, all this does is stay the case until the court decides whether to hear it. Hard to believe that you'd get the 5 judges to stay the case if they didn't want to hear the case and weren't going to vote the same way on the hearing. That is my limited reading of it, but they don't do things like this a lot. If they weren't going to hear it, they'd let the Texas law stand.
Right. I think that they will eventually, hopefully, make the right decision, especially considering precedent. But another thing that I thought was really fascinating about this story is, first of all, there were 41, I believe 41 abortion clinics at the time or before these laws were passed. Since then, a number of clinics have shut down, so there are only 19. If the Supreme Court decides, you know what, these laws are totally constitutional, we will allow them to stand, only 9 clinics will be open in Texas, and they're all open in larger cities within Texas. So women living in rural areas will not have maybe the financial means or even the ability to travel to the bigger cities in order to obtain the abortions.
Yeah, it's just, there's no, and the Huffington Post found out just last year that low-income women, as I was mentioning, we're already having illegal abortions. We don't go backwards. You cannot go backwards. Because if you want an abortion and you're determined to get it, you're going to get it.
Well, to buttress that point, prior to these regulations or these new laws, women from Mexico would travel to Texas in order to get abortions at the clinics here. And part of the reason why is because, you know, in Mexico, you have the option of taking the abortion pill, but it's not as safe. And now, as a result of these restrictions, women from the United States, Texas specifically, are traveling to Mexico to get the abortion pill. Other women are going to extreme measures. They're allowing people to punch them in the stomach. I mean, the kind of things that you heard decades and decades ago when abortion was much more restrictive. So this is not a positive way to handle abortion or whatever your thoughts are on abortion. If you're religious and you don't believe in abortions, then don't have one. But don't let your religious beliefs dictate the lives of everyone else. We always talk about religious freedom and religious liberty, but we never talk about freedom from religion. We're not allowed to have freedom from religion, according to these guys. Yeah, well, so that's a great sign. And eventually, maybe one day, conservatives will win a case in the Supreme Court again. I look forward to that day.